In light of the recent tragedy of Utah and so many other places in this country last week, I think it's important that we kind of start talking more. I mean, I think the beautiful, ironic, poetic thing of the tragedy of, a freedom of speech advocate fighter who will no longer speak a word on earth again is that it now opens up the mouths and the words of millions of other people across the world. When you look at what's going on with vigils in other countries and people's statements, I mean, you're hearing so many people talk about um, so many different things in this world that are changing people's opinions and voices, and I think it's cool. And I think there's, like I said, there's some sort of poetic thing about how now people will speak up, and I'm one of those people. So before we get talking about what I want this video to be about, I wanted to read a quote that I found throughout my research and throughout my time really looking into just everything. And the quote goes like this: one voice can change a room, and if it can change a room, it can change a city. And if it can change a city, it can change a state. And if it can change a state, it can change a nation. And if it can change a nation, it can change the world. Your voice can change the world. Now, it's a quote back in 2008 from then President Barack Obama. And I think that's relatively fitting right now because A, I think it's interesting that it comes from the left, but B, I also think it's interesting that it comes from um, Barack Obama, because we're in a place right now of the country where that mindset just got a man killed. And the mindset of simply speaking just got someone assassinated. But there will be a time and a place to talk about that. That's not exactly what I want to talk about, because with the increase in what seems like increase in gun violence in this country over the last couple of years, and specifically this past couple of weeks, I wanted to talk about how I'm seeing a lot of people, including some members of Congress, which we'll talk about and show in a little bit, talk about gun reform and how we need better gun laws in this country. And if you just look at statistics, that is not what will save guns from killing people from killing people. It will not. And so that's what this video is going to be about. So first, I'm going to start with a couple of statistics, and really this whole video will be backed by facts and statistics with all the sources linked in the description below. But what I want to mention here is that there are literally hundreds of millions of firearms in circulation right now in the United States of America. There are an estimated nearly 400 million guns in this country that are in circulation. Roughly 100 million people in America own a gun, or at least admit to owning a gun. That's more than a third of the country is holding a gun, which is a lot of people. And I think it's important that we understand that that doesn't mean there are 100 million bad people. Although I do think there's a clickbaity title. I think people will sort of interpret it as that. However, there are a lot of guns in circulation in this country. In the year 2022, there were over 48,000 firearm related deaths in the United States. Now, suicides are more than half, and homicides are over 40%. Now, a couple of things about that. Number one, we'll talk about ghost guns a little bit later, which are guns that are untrackable and don't have serial numbers on them. More importantly, I want to mention suicide for just a second, because although a tragic thing, I do think suicide is unfortunately at a point like cancer where everybody knows someone who has unfortunately given in to the suicide unfortunate disaster. And I will say that I don't think if we take guns away or make them harder to obtain, people who are in such a mental tragic place where they feel like that's the only answer, I don't think that simply removing guns is going to prevent them from not doing that. I think it's something that needs to be addressed at home. I think it's something that needs to be addressed at schools, and I think it's something that needs to be addressed in a medical way. But removing guns does not save either one of those statistics. And that's why I think a clip like this is so disingenuous. This is a clip of AOC talking about what needs to happen after Charlie Kirk's passing.
This is horrific. This is awful. And the assassination of Charlie Kirk risks an uncorking of political chaos. Are we going to do something, or are we going to argue over rhetoric? That is my question about this. We have to pass gun safety legislation and stop this.
And I agree that mental health matters in this country, and we need to do a much better job at helping, especially the youth, handle mental health issues. Especially ever since COVID, with the chronic online children of this world, I think it's really important that we find better avenues to help treat mental health, and we let kids realize that the world doesn't exist online. There's so much more out there in the world, that not everything you see online is what the world is. But I also think that it's just a lazy, clickbaity, trying to appeal to people's heartstrings, a way of thinking about how we can better protect people in this country. Because at the end of the day, when you talk about gun reform, when you talk about safety for guns, that's what I think it really means. I think you really just want people to be safer. And I think that's something that is not really talked about, because that can't be your clickbaity title. Now, here's where the data is really going to surprise you, because school shootings and mass shootings are tragic, and they are a disaster. And I wish none of them would ever happen, ever. I wish no one would ever get hurt simply going to school or going to a religious building or doing anything that they want to do that's not putting themselves deliberately in danger or illegal harm or any sort of criminal activity. But school shootings and mass shootings make up less than 1% of all the total firearm deaths in this country. And amongst kids and teens, most child firearm deaths are homicides in neighborhoods, and they are tragic and they are awful. But the number one reason that kids are dying from guns in this country is not mass shootings, it's not gang violence, it's suicides. And so we need to do a better job at addressing that. Gun reform will not stop kids from killing themselves. Gun reform will not stop gangs from illegally obtaining guns and illegally using them for illegal crimes. That will not help. What it will do is it'll make it harder for good law abiding citizens to obtain protection for themselves and their families. Firearm deaths were the leading cause of death for U.S. children in recent years, but school shootings and mass shootings make up a very, very small amount of that. I can't think of any other legislation where the primary focus on it, the number one fighting reason to make a change, is the less than 1% result of the actual thing. Because as previously mentioned, guns are not killing people in schools at an alarming rate compared to any other rate in which guns are killing kids. If you want fewer kids shot and killed in this country, you must deal with it in the places where most of the shootings are happening: community violence, gang crimes, illegal firearm trafficking, and suicides. Those are the areas where we have to attack. So when we hear of these people who want better results and less people dying in this country from guns, and their approach is to make it harder for it to obtain a gun legally, it becomes an issue, because we're almost there. We're almost to the point where it's going to really sort of be like, well, I don't know if these guys are going to do this appropriately. Have you guys ever heard of what a ghost gun is? I'm going to talk to you real quick about ghost guns. These are guns that are untrackable, guns that are either personally made or they were made to have their serial numbers filed off. They're guns that aren't bought traditionally. They're guns that aren't bought from like a sporting goods store. These are guns that are bought like illegally, and they are illegal to have. In between the years 2017 and 2023, there were a recovered increase of 1,600% of guns that did not have serial numbers on them. In that same time period, the amount of ghost guns related to crimes jumped from 1,600 to 27,000. The ATF said about 1,700 of those have been tied to homicide. That's 1,700 homicides with guns that are untrackable, while another 4,000 of them have been linked to a number of other violent crimes. Now, let's go back to, if we make it a little bit harder to obtain a gun legally, do you think those 1,700 illegal deaths, those illegal guns used in homicides, are going to somehow go away? Spoiler alert, no. So what can we actually do to help protect people from, well, dying from guns, specifically kids in this country? Well, I think there's a couple of things. And I don't think gun reform will ever work, because you're never going to get people to agree on something that will make it harder for law-abiding citizens to want to protect themselves. You have a right to protect yourself. You should protect yourself. And so making it, if you want to come and try to argue that it should be harder for that to happen, or in some cases impossible, you're never going to get people to agree. But what can we agree on? Well, I think we all can agree that we need better education in gun safety. I think we need to teach people how to store guns properly, responsible handling, and respect for firearms so kids don't treat them like toys. What does that look like? Well, where are buildings, where places where we can get a group of a mass amount of kids and we could teach kids all at one time? Can we think of anything we can do where a whole bunch of kids are all together and we could maybe sit them down behind a desk and maybe show, is there anything that we do in our day-to-day world where that happens? Yes. Now, there are some states in this country that have started to have educational gun safety classes in school. Utah is one of them, ironically, just passed this past year. But there are other guns. However, every single one of them is able to be opt out of if you have written consent from your parents, which feels a little weird. But I do think that we need to teach kids a lot more about gun safety because think of it, you take like a kid, right? They're playing video games all day, they're watching music videos or seeing movies and stuff. Guns are everywhere in this country. So it sort of desensitizes the threat of them. So if they do ever come across one, they probably don't treat it as serious as it needs to be. If we can get gun education and gun safety to a standpoint where every single kid in this country at least has the opportunity to learn how to properly take care of a gun, treat a gun, use a gun, handle a gun, I think that's good. Another thing that I think we need to do is we need to target enforcement. We need to get the guns that are being illegally used for crimes and stuff. We need to penalize people who use illegal guns much, much harder in this country. We need to give incentives to get rid of them. I don't think you'll ever voluntarily get criminals to come give you illegal guns. But if there were some sort of financial incentive or some sort of thing, then I do think that could possibly help a lot better than waiting for legislation to get off their butt and do something. Lastly, we need to focus on the children. We need to do programs that'll help children not fall into gangs, not fall into violence, not think that violence and criminal activity is the only path for them. We need to find ways to connect with them, and having some old people sit in some old building, yell at some old words, say some old things is never going to make it. Making it harder for criminals to do crime is not going to make crime stop.